Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. You're listening to Kallipolis Radio. My name is Rylan, and today we're reading Essay 6 from David Hume's collection, Essays, Moral and Political. It's titled, Of Love and Marriage. Thank you for listening. I know not whence it proceeds that women are so apt to take amiss everything which is said in disparagement of the married state, and always consider a satire upon matrimony as a satire upon themselves. Do they mean that they are the parties principally concerned, and that if a backwardness to enter into that state should prevail in the world, they would be the greatest sufferers? Or are they sensible that the misfortunes and miscarriages of the married state are owing more to their sex than to ours? I hope they do not intend to confess either of these two particulars, or to give such an advantage to their adversaries, the men, as even to allow them to suspect it. I have often had thoughts of complying with this humor of the fair sex, and of writing a panegyric upon marriage, but in looking around for materials, they seem to be of so mixed a nature that at the conclusion of my reflections, I found that I was as much disposed to write a satire, which might be placed on the opposite pages of the panegyric, and I am afraid that, as satire is, on most occasions, thought to contain more truth than panegyric, I should have done their cause more harm than good by this expedient. To misrepresent facts is what, I know, they will not require of me. I must be more a friend to truth than even to them, where their interests are opposite. I shall tell the women what it is that our sex complains of most in the married state, and if they be disposed to satisfy us in this particular, all the other differences will be easily accommodated. If I be not mistaken, 'tis their love of dominion which is the ground of the quarrel, though 'tis very likely that they will think it an unreasonable love of it in us, which makes us insist so much upon that point. However this may be, no passion seems to have more influence on female minds than this for power, and there is a remarkable instance in history of its prevailing above another passion, which is the only one that can be supposed a proper counterpoise for it. We are told that all the women in Scythia once conspired against the men, and kept the secret so well that they executed their design before they were suspected. They surprised the men in drink or asleep, bound them all fast in chains, and having called a solemn council of the whole sex, it was debated what expedient should be used to improve the present advantage, and prevent their falling again into slavery. To kill all of the men did not seem to the relish of any part of the assembly, notwithstanding the injuries formerly received, and they were afterwards pleased to make a great merit of this lenity of theirs. It was therefore agreed to put out the eyes of the whole male sex, and thereby resign in all future time the vanity which they could draw from their beauty, in order to secure their authority. We must no longer pretend to dress and show, say they, but then we shall be free from slavery. We shall hear no more tender sighs, but in return we shall hear no more imperious commands. Love must forever leave us, but he will carry subjection along with him. 'Tis regarded by some as an unlucky circumstance, since the women were resolved to maim the men, and deprive them of some of their senses, in order to render them humble and dependent, that the sense of hearing could not serve their purpose, since 'tis probable the females would rather have attacked that than the sight, and I think it is agreed among the learned that in a married state 'tis not near so great an inconvenience to lose the former sense as the latter. However this may be, we are told by modern anecdotes that some of the Scythian women did secretly spare their husbands' eyes, presuming, I suppose, that they could govern them as well by means of that sense as without it. But so incorrigible and untractable were these men, that their wives were all obliged, in a few years, as their youth and beauty decayed, to imitate the example of their sisters, which it was no difficult matter to do in a state where the female sex had once got the superiority. I know not if our Scottish ladies derive anything of this humour from their Scythian ancestors, but I must confess that I have often been surprised to see a woman very well pleased to take a fool for her mate, that she might govern with the less control, and could not but think that her sentiments, in this respect, still more barbarous than those of the Scythian women above mentioned, as much as the eyes of the understanding are more valuable than those of the body. But, to be just, and to lay the blame more equally, I am afraid it is the fault of our sex, if the women be so fond of rule, and that, if we did not abuse our authority, they would never think it worth while to dispute it. Tyrants, we know, produce rebels, and all of history informs us that rebels, when they prevail, are apt to become tyrants in their turn. For this reason, I could wish there were no pretensions to authority on either side, but that everything was carried on with perfect equality, as between two equal members of the same body, and to induce both parties to embrace those amicable sentiments, I shall deliver them to Plato's account of the origin of love and marriage. Mankind, according to that fanciful philosopher, were not, in their original, divided into male and female, as at present, but each individual person was a compound of both sexes, and was in himself both husband and wife, melted down into one living creature. This union, no doubt, was very entire, and the parts very well adjusted together, since there resulted a perfect harmony betwixt the male and the female, although they were obliged to be inseparable companions, and so great were the harmony and happiness flowing from it, that the androgynes, for so Plato calls them, or men-women, became insolent upon their prosperity, and rebelled against the gods. To punish them for this temerity, Jupiter could contrive no better expedient than to divorce the male part from the female, and make two imperfect beings of the compound, which was before so perfect. Hence the origin of men and women as distinct creatures. But, notwithstanding this division, so lively is our remembrance of the happiness which we enjoyed in our primeval state, that we are never at rest in this situation, but each of these halves is continually searching through the whole species to find the other half which was broken from it. And when they meet, they join again with the greatest fondness and sympathy. But it often happens that they are mistaken in this particular, and that they take for their half what no way corresponds to them, and that the parts do not meet nor join in with each other as usual in fractures. In this case the union was soon dissolved, and each part is set loose again to hunt for its lost half, joining itself to every one whom it meets by way of trial, and enjoying no rest until its perfect sympathy with its partner shows that it has at last been successful in its endeavors. Were I to dispose to carry on this fiction of Plato, which accounts for the mutual love betwixt the sexes in so agreeable a manner, I would do it by the following allegory. When Jupiter had separated the male from the female, and had quelled their pride and ambition by so severe an operation, he could not but repent him of the cruelty of his vengeance, and take compassion on poor mortals, who were now become incapable of any repose or tranquillity. Such cravings, such anxieties, such necessities arose as made them curse their creation, and think that existence itself was a punishment. In vain had they recourse to every other occupation and amusement. In vain did they seek after every pleasure of sense and every refinement of reason. Nothing could fill that void which they felt in their hearts, or supply the loss of their partner who was so fatally separated from them. To remedy this disorder, and to bestow some comfort at least on the human race in their forlorn situation, Jupiter sent down Love and Hymen to collect the broken halves of humankind and piece them together in the best manner possible. These two deities found such a prompt disposition in mankind to unite again in their primeval state that they proceeded on their work with wonderful success for some time, until at last, from many unlucky accidents, dissension arose betwixt them. The chief counselor and favorite of Hymen was Care, who was continually filling his patron's head with prospects of futurity, a settlement, family, children, servants, so that little else was regarded in all the matches that they made. On the other hand, Love had chosen Pleasure for his favorite, who was as pernicious a counselor as the other, and would never allow Love to look beyond the present momentary gratification or the satisfying of the prevailing inclination. These two favorites became, in a little time, irreconcilable enemies, and made it their chief business to undermine each other in all of their undertakings. No sooner had Love fixed upon two halves, which he was cementing together and forming to a close union, but Care insinuates himself, and bringing Hymen along with him, dissolves the union produced by Love, and joins each half to some other half which he had provided for it. To be revenged of this, Pleasure creeps in upon a pair already joined by Hymen, and calling Love to his assistance, they underhand contrive to join each half by secret links, to halves which Hymen was wholly unacquainted with. It was not long before this quarrel was felt in its pernicious consequences, and such complaints arose before the throne of Jupiter that he was obliged to summon the offending parties to appear before him, in order to give an account of their proceedings. After hearing the pleadings on both sides, he ordered an immediate reconcilement betwixt Love and Hymen, as the only expedient for giving happiness to mankind. And so that he might be sure this reconcilement should be durable, he laid his strict injunctions on them never to join any halves without consulting their favorites, Care and Pleasure, and obtaining the consent of both to the conjunction. Where this order is strictly observed, the androgyne is perfectly restored, and the human race enjoy the same happiness as in their primeval state. The seam is scarce perceived that joins the two beings, but both of them combine to form one perfect and happy creature. I've been Rylan, this is Kallipolis Radio, and thank you for listening.